Welcome to Making Connections. I'm your host, Tom Loucks, for River City's Community Access Media. Today I have Joe Terry, the new Public Works Director for the City of Wisconsin Rapids. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you.
Alrighty. Well, we're going to get to know him a bit more throughout this half-hour program right here on River City's Community Access. So we're going to turn it right over to Joe, and he's going to tell you about himself.
Well, thanks, Tom. I grew up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and in a kind of a rural setting, and went to school at UW-Madison, worked for the city of Marshfield for several years, worked for the Village of Port Edwards for 18 and a half years, and just started this September working for the City of Wisconsin Rapids as a Director of Public Works.
Alrighty, well, welcome aboard, and glad to meet you here today and get people to know who you are.
Thank you.
Well, you came to Rapids after 18 years over at Port Edwards. That's a long time as the engineer as well as an administrator, is right?
That's correct.
So, how has the transition come about in the last 4 months now? About?
Sure, it's been an exciting transition. Certainly, the City of Wisconsin Rapids is a lot bigger community than Port Edwards. The challenges are different. The role that I play here with the City of Wisconsin Rapids as a Director of Public Works is a bit more focused than the role that I had with the Village of Port Edwards. And so while it's more focused, there's more responsibility within that focus. So it's been pretty exciting so far.
Well, when you say the word public works, let's define that for people that might not be aware of what that means. Let's talk about, I know you oversee a lot of departments, but let's just break down real easy. Public works means what in a city?
Sure. So public works includes the street department, our wastewater department. I oversee the parks, and more recently with the creation of the airport administrator, I oversee that position, or that person in that position.
Well, this is a new position. I believe the city had a public works director years ago, maybe 5-7 years ago. I'm not real sure about that. But you're overseeing like wastewater, you're saying. When it comes to doing some of those projects, you have so many different things happening right now from where you were at Port Edwards, a lot bigger area. How do you organize or manage this? I know you have supervisors, is that right? Or actually
Sure.
department heads yet in those positions.
Right.
So you're not doing everything when it comes to that.
That's exactly right. Each department has department heads that oversees their staff, and my primary job there is to coordinate and make sure that we've got effective communication between those department heads, between the departments, and also within other departments in the city, such as waterworks and lighting with electric and water utilities that are also located within the city's right of way.
Well, there's a lot to do with public works. You have a water main break. Are you part of that?
Well, to some extent, yes. So waterworks and lighting handles the actual repair of the water mains, but the city crews will get involved with the traffic control, with notices, and we've been doing public notices, making sure that our aldermen are well informed of what's going on and where, and we also try to let folks know how long we anticipate that we may have a partial lane closure, those types of things.
Alrighty. Well, lots of responsibilities, it looks like, and a big change for you from what you were doing in Port Edwards. But some of the similarities were the same, is that right? You have a seat on the council here. You probably did at Port Edwards as well.
Well, so in Port Edwards, I was a member of really all of the committees except for the Protective Services Committee. Here in Wisconsin Rapids, I'm it's not a voting member of any committee, except for the Wastewater Commission. I'm certainly a part of that, but I'm the secretary of the Planning Commission, and a member of or employee participant in the Public Works.
Well, as a manager, you're looking at helping things run smoother. I know you've done some stuff now, even over at the city garage. Is that correct? You walk in and it's a different look, I hear.
Yes, it is. The city staff at the garage really did a fantastic job relocating our secretary front and center so that if the public stops in, there's someone there to welcome them. It improves the professional atmosphere of the office, and some minor maintenance work that the staff did really, really improve the aesthetics over at the garage.
So when we talk street department, Judy is our lady that's over there working in the front.
Correct.
But Jim Borski, he's your street superintendent,
Yes.
is that right? Now, his position and your position are quite a bit different, is that right?
Right. So he's primarily overseeing the day-to-day operations of the street department. My job is to make sure that that's being coordinated well within the departments, that we have plans and specifications from engineering department timely, so that the street department's ready to work in the spring. We've got everything lined up. General communication back and forth, and then oversight and budget as well.
Well, today I have Joe Terry in the studio, and we're learning about his position as the new Public Works Director, which he had started back in September of 2015. Well, let's talk about some of the major projects that are going to happen this year,
Sure.
and maybe ones that are slated years that are upcoming. I'm sure there's some big street projects. I know there was a couple last year. They're always ongoing. Let's talk about some of the big projects.
Sure. Well, one of the projects that we finished up this last fall was Chestnut from 8th to 16th. We'll be going back this year. We did not do the sanitary sewer. We did not replace the sanitary sewer last year, primarily because of the depth of that and the cost of the reconstruction of that. That sanitary sewer will be relined this year. Don't anticipate a whole lot of challenges as far as access or any issues with public access to the area for that project. We'll be reconstructing Apple Street from 12th to 15th. That street doesn't currently have much, if any, curb and gutter. The utilities there run north and south. The street runs east and west, so we'll be replacing the utilities that are in those intersections, getting those freshened up, curb and gutter, and bringing that street up to our city standards. We've got a couple of projects going on. First Street North, up by Poplar. We've got a infrastructure replacement project there. We'll be widening that street a little bit to meet our city standards, replacing the storm sewer, replacing the sanitary sewer, and replacing the water main in that project. We'll also be doing an overlay on First Street North, just south of the railroad tracks. So that area is going to be, last year the Buren project made travel a little bit difficult through there. We'll be adding to some of that difficulty this year with this project. But it's certainly something that's needed, and it'll be a good project for us. We have another project that'll be, I think, probably more impact to the general public that visits downtown, and that's 3rd Street North from Grand Avenue to Jackson. One block there. That will be replacing infrastructure as well, and with the buildings, there's a little more confined project, and obviously some little more effort towards traffic control that's very well marked, just because we've got a lot more non-residential traffic in those areas.
How are our roads? Are they in really good shape, or are we going to have trouble? I don't want to just say roads, but even infrastructure underneath. You're talking about water mains that
Sure.
nobody sees.
Right.
Who knows how old they are? One year, I remember there was a picture somebody had of from like 1910 or 20. I don't remember where that was from. They dug up, but it wasn't a water main that was in use. It was still, I believe,
Sure.
it was before you were here. But anyway, how old are they?
Well, the infrastructure age varies. There's infrastructure that was in the early 1900s up until current. One of the projects that I'm tasked with is really to take an overview look at all of our infrastructure and really exercise and complete a capital improvements plan that takes a look at what the needs of the city are, and then balances that with the ability that the city has to fund those needs. For example, though, we've got about 150 miles of streets in the community. And we've got some streets that we've been able to make last 50 to 60 years through some careful and diligent maintenance. But even then, we're only replacing roads right now at a pace of about a mile a year. So at a mile a year, our streets would have to last 150 years life cycle. So we're currently replacing our streets and infrastructure maybe a little slower than what we should be. But I think one of the real issues there is we have to define what needs to be replaced and have a very articulate cycle for how it would be replaced before we can start talking about how we're going to fund that replacement. So that's certainly one of the big projects for me coming up for our storm sewer, for our streets, and particularly also for our sanitary sewer.
When it comes to street maintenance, there's a lot of departments involved. You have surveying, which is engineering.
Correct.
You've got wastewater, you got water, you got them all. So that's one of the reasons it's really important to have a public works director to make sure that we're all in unison.
Right, working as a team, and that's really one of the reasons I was hired here, is to really help make sure that these things flow. The engineering department does the survey work, the design work on most of the street reconstruction projects. They'll do the construction survey for getting ready for construction. They'll work with the street department and the construction crew. Also work with waterworks and lighting. So we've got there's a lot of cooperation and collaboration needs to take place to make these projects successful. And with over the years it's affected everybody, but staffs have been reduced somewhat, and people are expected to do a bit more. And so some of those staff members that maybe had multiple roles just don't have the time to coordinate as a large group. And so that's really one of my primary tasks, is to be that facilitator.
Do you feel the staffs have seen a difference and like it already?
Well, so far I've had some good feedback. I certainly think that having someone else that has a background in construction and public works to be able to network and communicate with on a regular basis, when there's general questions or some, the opportunity for some reassurance or redirection as needed. I've felt that I've had a positive impact so far. I think the communication has worked out very well, and from that end, it's been fairly easy for me because the city's been blessed with some very good staff.
Great. Well, your title, having an engineer, is a benefit as well. Is that right? As some public works directors in other communities, do you have to be an engineer, or that helps?
In most larger cities, that's certainly something that they look for, is that professional engineering license. Just from a standpoint of understanding both the design aspect of projects and public works, as well as construction. There are a number of design engineers that don't necessarily have a lot of experience in construction, and so that's why I think a lot of communities, especially smaller communities, you might see that wouldn't have a PE for their public works director, because that really sometimes the emphasis is on that public construction aspect.
Well, it's February 15th. We're still going to have a lot of snow coming yet. I don't think winter's over. Let's talk a little bit about snow plowing rules, things that you could tell the public. I know a lot of times they'll ask why their road isn't plowed.
Sure.
Maybe you just give a little insight on what the city does when we get a major snowfall, and maybe one that's maybe 1 or 2 inches.
Sure. So snow and ice control is probably one of the most visible services that the street department performs. A lot of the other aspects of public works generally would go unnoticed or perhaps underappreciated unless there's a problem. Most people wouldn't necessarily appreciate the condition of a street until there's a pothole, or appreciate the condition of their sanitary sewer unless there was a backup. With snow and ice control, it's just the opposite. People expect that the streets are reasonably clear of snow and ice, and so that's a very visible task. Service that the street department provides. And I would say generally, at least in my experience, come February, mid-February, early March, most people, including myself, are getting pretty tired of winter. So sometimes patience runs thin when the boulevards are piled high with snow, and the snowplow comes by, and now there's snow on the sidewalk, and there's nowhere to go with the banks and such. So this time of year especially, there tends to be some frustration. The city has a number of different types of roads. We have our connecting highways, we have our major collector streets, and we have our local residentials. The city puts a priority on maintaining those connecting highways. Clearly, that's where most of the traffic is, and so the city will maintain those streets and roads in a condition that's far more snow-free and ice-free than what we could afford to do on a lot of our local streets. Our collector streets as well, we try to really make sure that our major network of streets between the neighborhoods to our connecting highways are relatively clear of snow and ice. And then our residential streets, we just don't have the budget capability to keep those completely clear. And so there is an expectation that there may be some snow and ice on those streets. Our policy requires us to go out and plow if there's 4 inches of snow, but it does allow some discretion, and we've certainly used that where there's some small snowfalls and we know that if it starts piling up, it's going to cause some problems. So we'll go out and try to take care of it the best we can. You'll see in the downtown neighborhoods where once the boulevards start to get covered with snow, the crews will go out there and try to pull some of that into the street and load it out so that there's more storage for future snow events. And spend several days after a snow event cleaning up the big piles in the downtown area, trying to make space again for the next one.
We haven't had too many major events yet, knock on wood, right?
Right.
But we still have a good month of serious storms.
Right.
So you budget, I guess, major storms, 6, 7 of them, somewhere in there. Major storm to you is over 4 inches of snow.
Sure.
How is the salt? Are we in good shape, or we're gonna run low?
We're in pretty good shape this year. There's been a number of small events that we've had to go out. Last night was a prime example. We had a inch and a half of light fluffy snow, and in some of the areas that was starting to glass up a little bit and be slippery, and so we were taking care of those on our connecting highways and our major streets. And we didn't do a whole lot of work in the residential neighborhoods just for that reason. They're slower traffic, there's not as much volume, and salt is very expensive. It's approaching $70 a ton for salt. And we can go through an awful lot of salt. A quad axle dump truck will handle 20 tons of salt, and you start doing the math on that and it adds up in a hurry. So we have to be conservative as we can, so that we're not overspending. Also, salt is not particularly friendly to the rivers and lakes, and salt doesn't go away. And so in this country we've been using salt, and we haven't been using it forever, and those chlorides continue to build up in our rivers and lakes. So we want to be cognizant that we're using enough for public safety, but not so much that it's not cost effective and becomes an environmental issue.
Well, I'm sure over the past several 15, 20 years before you or anybody here, there's been other attempts of using different kinds of methods in cities all around, I've heard, right?
Sure.
Sometimes you're going on a highway, they do a spray.
Right,
And
brine spray.
we don't do that here. Right?
We haven't started doing that yet. There are certainly some advantages of it. There's some pros and cons. Cost-wise, the equipment gets a little more expensive to operate and maintain, but it does offer the opportunity to get some material down sometimes before the storm, and that can be beneficial as well. So, at this time we haven't endeavored that direction, but as times change and methods change and the technology changes, we're always looking for the best way to serve the community.
And when it snows, I guess, do you make that decision? Does the Public Works, or who makes the decision to send the guys out?
Well, it does depend on the event. Our street superintendent and street supervisor are in contact with the police department. If our police department finds that we've got some intersections that are getting slippery, they'll make a call and we'll get some staff out there and take care of that. If it's a known event, Jim or Paul, one of the guys, will be paying close attention, and making a decision. We try to let the staff know in advance so that they can get enough sleep and anticipate when we're going to come in and do that full-scale plowing.
That's how that works. I think a lot of people wanted to know,
Sure.
On a Sunday, how does, they're not sitting over at City Garage.
No.
They're called in.
Right, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, so saves a lot on money. So
It does.
they're willing to work when you got to call them in. That's
Right.
kind of like being on call. Well, let's switch gears. Recycling. That's
Yes.
a big thing that's happening here in Rapids, or really any community. But our truck, as we all know, it is starting to get older.
Correct.
I believe it was purchased around in the 90s.
Yeah, it's certainly at the end of its service life, and it'd be an easy replacement, but technology has changed, and many communities have started using single stream recycling and automated recycling. Right now, of course, we separate our paper from all of our other products, so that's a dual stream recycling process. There's a market for that paper right here with our local paper industry, and so that makes sense. We also have contracted with a vendor that we can unload our recyclable materials locally right here in town, save some transportation costs. The one issue with garbage and recycling is the frequency of which the operator is getting in and out of that truck. It's about 650 to 700 times a day they're getting in and out of that vehicle. And especially in the winter months, there's a significant risk of slip and fall injuries. That's always a substantial risk for any public works department, but especially for garbage and recycling collection, because these folks are in and out all the time. And for anyone that spends much time walking around outside, how, like this morning, for example, we've got a little bit of snow cover. You really can't see the ice. There's times these gentlemen are taking tumbles multiple times a day. City's been fortunate, but it's certainly the technology is there to reduce some of that risk and try to be a little more efficient as well in our recycling collection efforts. The automated single stream process, instead of having smaller bins that we're looking at, would utilize a tote. It's a larger can. And we're reviewing that. I've just submitted a report to the Public Works Committee and the council here just this past month. What would happen instead of just setting out the small bins is that you'd set out this large can, and the truck comes by and has an arm that grabs a can and unloads. So the operator can stay in the vehicle. The units have a small identification tag that the truck can read to make sure that that's a can that was delivered at that place, that in fact it was picked up or it was missed, those types of things. So the technology is much more advanced from what we have. It's quite a bit safer. The cans tend to be much neater, and generally, at least studies that the University of Wisconsin has conducted, there's a fairly significant increase in recycling and putting out recyclables because it's very convenient. The issue with this type of technology is that the truck costs a little bit more, but you've got that major investment in those cans. And so that's what right now the Public Works Committee is evaluating. I just published a report here a week ago, and the committee's reviewing that over the period of this month. It also will be on, if it isn't already, it'll be on the City of Wisconsin Rapids website for the public to take a look at. And since it's critical that we take a direction on the replacement of that truck, if the public would like to provide some input or have some insight, feel free to, they can feel free to take a look at the report, contact myself or contact their alderman, their representative, and be a part of the process and offer their opinions.
Alrighty. Well, it looks like some new things are going to come about over the next several months, but that's not going to happen tomorrow. You'd have to order a truck, but this has
Right.
to go through committee and it has to go through council. So,
Finance, right.
but what do you do right now with the truck we have? Just try to keep piecing it together and hopefully it stays together?
Yeah, our maintenance staff has been pretty creative in keeping that machine reliable. there's been a lot of work, and it's certainly at the end of its service life. If we were to implement a single stream recycling program here in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, it's not likely that it would take place until fall. With any luck, we could still do it this year, but there's an enormous amount of public information that needs, and public education that needs to happen so that people understand, if we make a change, how the containers work, where's the best place to place them, and just it's a change of service. And anytime, we're creatures of habit, and anytime there's any type of significant change, we need to know what we need to do.
Now, our recycling goes to a couple different places, you're saying now, compared to some other communities like Stevens Point and Plover. If we were to go to a single stream, where would it go? Will it be? It'll all be together, you're saying, paper,
correct. Right?
But there'll be different rules than it is today. Maybe then it would be different than today.
Right. So if we went to single stream, there would be no need to separate anything. You put all your recyclables in this large container. It's got wheels on it. You tip it. You walk it out to the edge of the driveway, and that's all that the resident would have to worry about.
That's the way I like it. But I think I think a lot of people would. I bet you communities have seen an increase by the ease.
Generally, a substantial increase. From 10 to 25%, from going from dual stream to single stream, and then another 10 to 35% going from non-automated to automated. So there can be a very substantial increase in the collection of recyclables. And while the containers do have some costs, there's also the long-term environmental benefits of keeping these landfills open longer before having to open new landfills. The more that we can reutilize these materials, the better.
So at this point right now, recycling is a lot cheaper, even though there's some pay of tonnage that you have to do. Don't you have to pay, the cities have to pay for recycling, or is that free yet?
So currently with the City of Wisconsin Rapids, the contract that the city has, there are no costs per ton for recycling. However, the recyclable market has really fallen flat. With the price of oil being low, the plastics really aren't in demand. Recycling of glass has been a real issue. There just isn't a demand for recycled glass. And so the value that these vendors are getting when they're trying to resell these products to manufacturers has been quite low. And so the city will end up very soon having to pay tipping fees for recycling as well. There are several options for where the recycling can go. Currently, we have a contract, and we deliver that to a local site where it's where the paper is bundled and sold locally, and all the other items are transferred to a different station. The city could continue to contract similarly. It could deliver directly to the recycling facility in Plover. There's a number of different options that would have to be looked at, and it would depend on the efficiency and time. If the process is more efficient and it makes sense for the city to make that delivery and it's cost effective to do that, that's a direction that we would take a look at. If it makes more sense to continue to have a local drop site and that's the most effective and efficient way to do it, of course we'd take a look at that as well.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for all that information on recycling and garbage and all your responsibilities over at the Public Works office here at City Hall. Anything else, Joe, that you wanted to bring up that I may have missed? I'm sure we'll get a chance to revisit throughout the year again.
Sure. Well, I would like to, my whole career has been around Public Works, and I would really like the public to have the opportunity to appreciate the streets, our sidewalks, our parks, our water and wastewater infrastructure, and be a part of the process. These are important pieces of infrastructure that maybe our parents, but our grandparents and great grandparents paid for, and it's easy to ignore. It's hard to appreciate. So in order to try to help that, since I started working here, I've put together a monthly report It's available on our city website, and it just highlights a few of the accomplishments that our city has made in the previous month in the public works arena. And I'll continue to do that. The effort there is to make our work as transparent as possible. Kind of let the public know, well, what are these guys doing? They're driving around in this red truck, and what are they doing? What did they accomplish this last month? I think that's really important. The more we can educate each other, the better. And some of these initiatives, like our recycling program, certainly would like to see as much public participation and interest as the public is willing to provide. So some of these things we're trying to do just out of transparency and communication. I do anticipate in the spring trying to create some events where I can meet with the public directly and get input. And certainly, a phone call away, and or you can stop by, and if you get lucky, you'll catch me in my office.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming by and sharing all that great information. And it sounds like your door is open for residents to stop by or give you a call, make an appointment. They can reach you on second floor. Is that right?
Second floor. I'm
Okay.
working in the engineering department, my office, and I certainly thank you for the opportunity to get to know the community.
All right, great. Well, thanks for watching us on River City's Community Access Media. And for next time, catch us on Channel 3 and Channel 985. Thanks again.